Hello guys, it's Sean. We're doing another Bakugan video, semi-Bakugan discussion. And I want to explain why I just don't think Spinmaster was ever actually good. By the way, this is going to be a video where the image on screen is just static. I'm just sitting here talking. Feel free to throw us like a background tab or something. Anyway, just want to explain kind of this, I guess, theory I had on why Bakugan I feel like has been mishandled horribly, really ever since late Gen 1, honestly, but yeah, it's not been great. So anyway, to give some background information, Bakugan, from what we know, was, well, initially developed by Spinmaster and prototyped by Spinmaster, but apparently they didn't like some stuff about Bakugan, so they actually asked for the assistance of Sega Toys, a Japanese brand. And Sega Toys and Spinmaster together made Gen 1 what it was. And that is the immediate issue. I honestly believe Sega Toys hard carried Bakugan during Gen 1 when it was good, I guess you'd say. So looking at Gen 1 and even Gen 2, not Gen 1 and 2, Seasons 1 and 2 of Gen 1, Battle Brawlers and New Vestroya, I think it was obvious these two seasons actually kind of felt connected. I feel like in Alien Invaders is where a shift began. We'll get to that. So there are a few oddities with Battle Brawlers, which is that they did not release some of those late Bakugan. However, I think you could just attribute this to Sega Toys kind of dropped off. Bakugan flopped in Japan, and I feel like it's very possible that Sega Toys just never really got around to properly developing a lot of these Bakugan. They probably never got full prototypes finished, and maybe these were harder to work out, or maybe they were going to just leave some of these to the show. But we do know Ultimate Dragonoid, as well as Silent Naga, never released, but they were CAD modeled. There was a commercial that was pointed out a while ago where, yes, these were CAD modeled at one point. So it's likely that prototypes do exist of these, but they were probably never finished. And so maybe, again, this is just a theory of mine, but I believe that this is where Sega Toys kind of stopped. I think they got to this point where Sega Toys was handling a lot of the development. Again, they reached out to Sega Toys to help with development. I think Sega Toys was hard carrying at this point, and I believe that after seeing it flop in Japan, they were already probably, developed like all of season 1 at this point, but they maybe hadn't finished all the modeling, figuring out the prototypes and how they maybe needed to be altered to make for better toys. I think that is where Sega Toys sort of, I don't want to say left the operation, but I think they were kind of willing to give the reins more to Spinmaster because, again, it flopped in Japan. So obviously they were focusing more on the international market at this point. And of course, Bakugan did great out here in the West. So I think maybe these were CAD modeled, never finished, the prototype stage. And then anything after that, like, a proper version of Infinity Dragonoid, not the New Destroy one that's just wrong in terms of its ball form. And also those 6 sort of hybrid Bakugan, also like 5th Paladin. I think they just straight up never really got around to making these. And, well, the only question, or I guess hole in this part of this section of the video is Hydronoid. Where was Hydronoid? Yeah, I don't know. This is the one, again, this is like the one issue I have here, is that I don't really know why they would have skipped over the original Hydronoid. Obviously, this is a new Destroyer release. Again, maybe there were issues with making this one. Maybe there were delays. Maybe it was supposed to come out. This is the one thing where I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what to say here. So maybe there's some kind of explanation for it. It could just be a one-off thing, but yeah. Anyway, moving on to New Vestroya. So even though, I think that, again, Bakugan flops in Japan, they kind of give the reins more to Spinmaster. It's very likely that they were already working on a Season 2. It's very common for, these companies to map out an entire season, at least have a lot of things being produced, even if they aren't fully finished. But at that point, they're already working on a Season 2, maybe even conceptualizing like a 3rd season, like in early stages, right? I think that's exactly what happened. I think Sega Toys kind of dipped off during that point. Again, they were mostly done with production of Season 1, and I think they probably worked on a lot of Season 2, and at least did some concepts for Season 3. New Estrella, I think, shows this perfectly. I think they probably already had designs and stuff ready to go, but the CAD modeling probably wasn't all there yet. Maybe early waves were done. I imagine prototypes were probably very sparse at this point. But Spinmaster probably was able to finish these off. And then we get to the second half of New Estrella. What happened? Obviously, yeah, it's no secret that the second half of New Estrella was a mess. We got a bunch of random stuff. Like, it was just random Bakugan and random, like, quote-unquote evolutions, like Myriad Hades or, like, Pyro Dragonoid. What are these? Um, like, there's a lot of Bakugan based on the main Bakugan, whether it be, like, the, you know, actual Battle Brawlers or Resistance, we're going to call them, or, like, the Vexos Bakugan. There were some alternate versions made of these Bakugan, but they were never proper evolutions. We missed out on all of them. All of those final evolutions from, the Battle Brawlers, all six of them, we never got. We also, from the Vexos, there were like a few evolutions there. The only one we really got was Alto Brontes, randomly. Maybe it was just easy to make for some reason, and they just made it anyway. I don't know here. But like the other ones, like Blast Alico, Rex Vulcan, Helios Mark II, they never made them. And all of the mechanical Bakugan, aside from like the very early ones, like Hades or Altair and Wired, those ones, they didn't make them. They didn't make any of the replacements or like Farbros. I forget the exact pronunciation. I think it's Farbros. Anyway, and also Dryoid. They never made these. I think it's simply because these Bakugan were a little bit more complicated in terms of the designs, and I think Spinmaster saw this. They knew the CAD models probably were not finished at this point, and just decided, let's not make them because it's difficult. And Sega Toys is probably the only one who would have actually done these. Now, the next hole in this theory really comes in with the fact that Sega Toys actually did release some of these. Cross Dragonoid, Knight Percival, Master Ingram, a Minx Elephant, Helios Mark II, Blast Elico. Did I say Blast Elico? I apologize if I missed one and just said that twice, but anyway. There were 6 Bakugan that they released. It is possible that maybe they were planning some of these and then dropped it and, only CAD modeled so many. But still, maybe they finished these up or something and they hadn't got to the other ones and they just never bothered to make the other ones. Or maybe they just thought these 6 in particular were like the best to make. Again, this is really weird, and again, there could be an explanation. Again, maybe these, along with like Alto Brontes, are like the only 7 from late New Estrella that actually ever did get proper modeling and prototypes that were close enough to release from to at least finish up those other 6, with Alto Brontes being the one that was actually perfectly fine. And then they just opted to not make the rest, because again, it would have been a lot of effort for them to do that, and again, Bakugan just might not have been doing well enough for them to care enough to make them. So just didn't. That's the best theory I could really give here, but again, I think that was potentially why they might have, not made more. So that's New Estrella. Again, a mess of a series that clearly was not handled well. And I think, again, a lot of that was because eventually Sega Toys kind of dropped off the development of it because it failed in Japan with Battle Brawlers. And then we get to Gundalian Invaders. Gundalian Invaders is immediately different. The colors themselves and just kind of the general designs of the Bakugan and some of the gimmicks, immediately different. Things like, like the exoskin stuff, from like the smoothness of Rubinoid or like the roughness of Avior. You had some other ones, like the Double Strike or whatever. And Super Assault, like the Quake gimmick, or like just like a dice. I guess they already had dice, kind of, but yeah. It was weird. There's a lot of weird stuff in Daily Invaders. I feel like, personally, Spinmaster and Sega Toys probably at least conceptualized some early in Daily Invader stuff, maybe some of the base designs, and also maybe like the battle gear idea. But again, I imagine by the time Sega Toys maybe took a step back, the base concepts were there, but they had to kind of finish it off. They actually had to, put in their own minds to develop the rest of the season to make it function. And I think that's what happened. I think the base idea of Gundalian Invaders was pretty good, but some of the execution here and there wasn't quite right, and also we saw issues, I think, in like waves 4 and 5 where they were just releasing Bakugan that no one ever cared about, and we didn't really get any like evolutions or anything cool. It felt like they were maybe just taking what they had and were trying to do that, and then whatever else they were just kind of throwing out at that point. Um, Again, that's just kind of my thought on how that could have went. And again, this all hinges on the fact that Sega Toys did take over a lot and then kind of took a step back when it failed in Japan, which I think is a likely assumption, which is why I'm making this entire video, because I want to explain my reasoning here. Anyway, moving on. Titanium Surge. Here's the thing. If Sega Toys sort of dropped off during Season 1 in Japan when it failed, it's unlikely that they had a fourth season conceptualized at that point. Maybe a vague idea or something, but it probably was never set in stone. It's unlikely that they were thinking that far ahead. And you can tell. Dayland Invaders already started a shift. We had things like, mobile assaults, which I feel like were definitely getting a little bit weird, and I feel like those were probably not in the original concept, and were just things that Spinmaster made up. Mectanium Surge, well, now for Bakugan had to have metal, and all had to have some kind of weird gimmick to them that wasn't really thought out very well. And of course, the amount of support pieces. They kept Battle Gear, then they added Mectagon and Mectagon Titans and Baku Nano. Mectagon and Mectagon Titans in particular, these just did not feel right to me. I don't think these were ever really meant to be things to be released in Japan. I feel like Bakugan, in terms of its concepts, I could see why it didn't do well in Japan, because in Japan, like, toys are taken a little bit more seriously and are more dynamic and unique, and I feel like Bakugan kind of missed that mark. And Mectagon, they just feel like cheap action figures. I'm sorry, I don't think these would have lasted in Japan if they came out. Anyway, Mectanium Surge was just an absolute mess, and I don't think Sega Toys had a whole lot to do with it. And I was looking at the second arc again. Well, they did, take a step back from Mectagon and stuff. They didn't make as many. Mectagon Titans and Bakugan were kind of dead. Mobile assaults were replaced by battle suits. I'd argue battle suits were worse, honestly, but anyway. Moving on, we have, of course, the Bakugan, and these were very gimmicky. They had to, jump or fuse or be like a mine. Yeah, I think at this point, the gimmicks, and here's the thing, I actually think gimmicks would have been good for Bakugan in Japan, but the way Spinmaster was making the gimmicks, they were not good. They were not well thought out at all, and just not interesting. So, anyway, looking at all this, right? Well, let's bring this back to kind of Sega Toys. And when you look at Sega Toys, again, they started up New Destroying and Dale Invaders after we had already gotten them in the West, and it kind of just seemed like they were releasing stuff that we already got. Yeah, we're listening to combat sets or whatever, like Gundale Invaders, so like a Bakugan and its battle gear. Makes sense. But then you get to Mectanium Surge. Guess what they did not release in Japan? Mectanium Surge. They planned it, and they canceled it. They probably saw how bad it was, and realized, wait a minute, we don't actually want to release this. Also, this furthers my point of why I just don't think they really did much with this. Again, I think Sega Toys kind of shifted to be more of just a distributor eventually. Maybe helping with some, development, but not really, like the concept making. I mean, more production development. Anyway. But yeah, I just think that they just opted to not release this because it wasn't really their work, and it just wasn't good. And the fact they skipped out on this entirely also makes me think that, again, they eventually did sort of stop doing production because they just, again, they didn't care about what this was. It wasn't doing well in Japan. Anyway. So yeah, I think that they eventually dropped off, and I think that's why Bakugan went downhill so bad in Gen 1. It's because Sega Toys and their concept making and stuff eventually faded away, and that's why Bakugan kind of eventually got a bit worse over time. And eventually, when they had to take over entirely, Spinmaster made Mectanium Surge, which was generally considered to be the worst part of, Bakugan in Gen 1. Also, Spinmaster, they've always struggled with distribution. All of Gen 1, at some point or another, distribution was an issue. We always saw this happen. And I just want to mention that as well. So yeah, we kind of have a messy gen, a very, very messy gen, and a lot of distribution problems on the Spinmaster side of things. So that's kind of my theory on what happened. Now you might be saying, you just rambled for 15 minutes on this insane thing. Why even talk about this? It's kind of far-fetched sounding, right? Okay, here's my kind of backup to why I think this. Sega Toys eventually decided to make their own line, which I think was more suited to the Japanese market, Bakutech. And Bakutech, in my eyes, was the best Bakugan has ever been, and I think a lot of people will agree with this. Bakutech was great. Again, it had the convert system, which was really cool. They eventually made it into its own thing. Actually, in a place of Titanium Surge, they made Bakutech the forefront of Bakugan in Japan. That got a second season with Bakutech Gachi with the bind system. And then there was, after that, the very short-lived Bakugan Armors. All of these Bakugan had gimmicks that actually worked well in terms of like their system design, and also just certain ones had their own gimmicks that, again, were cool and interesting and actually felt dynamic and not forced. And also, there were not these horrible production issues where Bakugan just were not coming out or were releasing it months after or before they were supposed to come out. Sega Toys actually had a handle on distribution and what they were doing with Bakugan. This is the one time we actually saw Sega Toys have full control over Bakugan. Bakutech was not controlled by Spinmaster at all. Just Sega Toys, and we saw what Sega Toys did. And also just the gameplay of Bakugan was even better with Bakutech and how they handled it, and just like the Japanese rule set in general. Sega Toys clearly had a handle on how to make Bakugan good and how to even just make it its own unique game. Spinmaster didn't, and we see this with Gens 2 and 3. Gen 2, I feel like the Bakugan were just cheaper. The designs, I just don't think really hit the same. They just felt kind of off. And again, I feel like when you look at Bakutech compared to Legacy, to me, Bakutech almost just feels like a third season after Battle Brawlers and Nuva Destroya. It almost seems like what maybe they would have conceptualized on their own for a season 3 of Bakugan. And then, of course, Spinmaster did their thing, and Daylin Invaders wasn't bad, but Titanium Surge was not good at all. And then we kind of see Spinmaster go off with Gen 2, and it, again, kind of feels, I don't want to say like Titanium Surge, but it just differs a lot. Kind of like how Titanium Surge differs a lot from the previous 3 seasons. Anyway. But yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of problems with Gen 2 and the designs of the Bakugan, just general ideas. There was some cool stuff, but again, it just feels mismanaged and messy, like Titanium Surge in that sense, at least in my opinion. And we saw this with a lot of other things. Like, again, you have Armored Alliance. I don't think Bakugear was very cool. Fusions, I don't think were handled well. Geogan Rising and Geogan were weird. Evolutions, you had like Nanogon, which were fine. I mean, those were kind of whatever. Platinum Bakugan were fine. And throughout these 4 seasons, you did have Ultras, although I guess it was mainly the first 3 seasons, but whatever. Ultras were pretty cool. Those were meant to be more dynamic designs, but I feel like they still don't hit the same as kind of a complex Bakutech. I feel like they really nailed the design of Bakugan, what it could really do, and with Ultras, they were kind of messy in my eyes, and some of them looked cool, others were just kind of a mess, honestly. Also, ergonomically, they were horrible to start off. They eventually found a better balance, but the Bakugan weren't as crazy, I guess. But I feel like, again, Bakutech just knew what it was doing. And with Spinmaster, it just feels like they didn't know exactly what to do, and it was just kind of a mess. Also, I saved it for last, Bakugan Legends. Legends with Nova Bakugan, those were just stupid. What happened there? And of course, there's also the TCG. While people like the TCG, and the TCG, you can debate about it. I'm not a TCG person, so I can't really say whether or not the game was actually good or not. But some people like it, some people don't. It is what it is. But I feel like the problem with the TCG isn't the TCG itself, it's the Bakugan. The Bakugan themselves are reduced to just kind of a basic skill mechanic. You have to roll them. And while, yeah, it is important to roll them properly, I mean, to get certain cores and stuff. But I feel like the gameplay of something like, the Japanese version of Bakugan we saw in Bakutech felt like a more unique actual Bakugan game. Again, Sega Toys knew what they were doing with Bakugan. Spinmaster, it just feels like they never did. And again, that goes back to when Spinmaster reached out to Sega Toys for help on like game design and stuff. It makes sense to why they did. And also, again, going back to distribution, Gen 2 distribution was a mess. The TCG, a lot of people blame the pandemic on the TCG failing, but here's the thing. Distribution and the handling of the TCG in general is already kind of a mess, and honestly, I'd almost just argue in shambles by the time the pandemic even started. And it just felt more like an excuse for them to just pull the plug on it, honestly. Gen 2, while it did some things right, and it felt like Spinmaster actually was trying with Gen 2, at least to start, it was clearly mismanaged, and it, again, kind of goes back to something similar to Titanium Surge, in my opinion, with it just feeling very messy. And now you have Gen 3. Gen 3, they just don't know what they're doing at this point. They're just throwing stuff out. Gen 3 is just absolutely atrocious. I feel like the Bakugan designs themselves, they kind of figured out a little bit more on what they're doing, but it's not quite right either, and the game design is a joke. The gimmicks aren't very good. It feels like they don't understand what makes Bakugan Bakugan, and again, it feels like they never did. Again, if you assume I'm correct in saying that Titanium Surge was solely developed by Spinmaster and Sega Toys had dropped off at that point, again, it feels similar. They didn't really know what they were doing with the designs, at least not fully, which is the same as it is now. And that's everything I have to say. I know this is kind of a mess of a video, and it might be a little hard to try to figure out what I'm trying to get at here. But my argument is that Sega Toys, they were the ones actually hard carrying Bakugan and made it what it was and made it good. And Spin Master just didn't know what they were doing. They kind of just were along for the ride because they had the rights to it because they, well, found it and also did the prototyping and stuff and got it going. And again, they just were enlisted the help of Sega Toys, which again, hard carried, and yeah, you get the point. Yeah, and then like they were left to their own devices and did not know what to do about it. And that's kind of my theory, and I think again they did, like Sega Toys did take a step back eventually. So anyway, with all that said, my final point here is, yeah, Spin Master never actually knew what they were doing, and I also wanted to say, a lot of people seem to think that maybe, you know, Spin Master can turn things around with Gen 3, or if not, they can make a better Gen 4. It's not going to happen. Spin Master has clearly just shown that they don't know how to handle Bakugan. Again, if you assume I'm right, they did not know how to handle continuing Gen 1, and the ending of it flopped. They did not know how to handle Gen 2 properly. They made a TCG, which was fine, but it didn't capture what Bakugan really was. And then Gen 3, they just don't know what's even going on anymore. Unless there are some serious management changes, I don't think Gen 3 or any other future gens could ever actually be good. I just don't think Spin Master knows what they're doing. Sega Toys, they knew what they were doing. Clearly. Look at Bakutech. Bakutech, for many people, is the peak of Bakugan. And if it's not, they probably just don't know much about Bakutech, I'm being honest here, so... Yeah, that's kind of my whole rambling on what I think happened to Bakugan behind the scenes with Spin Master and Sega Toys. Again, I could be off the mark here, but that's just my theory and what I think makes sense to why Bakugan ended up the way it was. And again, it would make sense if Bakugan flopped in Japan, and Sega Toys kind of took a step back, especially looking at the fact that they just never released Titanium Surge, because, again, it probably wasn't even their work. But yeah, that's everything I think that I had to say for the most part. I know, again, it's a little bit of a messy video. I don't know how to organize everything properly here. I just wanted to throw everything out from my mind, just be like, this is what I think happened, and this is why you should just never expect Bakugan to ever be good again, because, again, they just don't know what they're doing in the slightest. So with that said, yeah, again, management changes in Spin Master need to happen, otherwise it's not changing, or bring back Sega Toys. Unfortunately, Takutomi did handle the distribution of Bakugan for Gen 2, so and that was just like a one-to-one distribution. So unless if Takutomi makes their own line, or they lose the rights and Sega Toys somehow get it back to reboot Bakutech, yeah, again, I would not expect anything from this franchise to ever happen again, unfortunately. So there you go. That's my whole theory. It's a weird theory, I feel like, but hopefully it at least makes enough sense, and maybe some people at least kind of understand what I'm saying. You can leave a comment if you want me to explain more, because again, I feel like I'm just saying words at this point, and hoping they make sense, because again, this is like a complicated issue, I feel like. I might do another video on this eventually to reorganize some stuff, and also, maybe if anyone knows any specific information on this, let me know. Yeah, no, let me know that. If there's anything I actually did not know here, because I did look into it, but yeah. If you have any information, yeah, let me know. I might do a follow-up discussion to organize certain things, or maybe even answer questions if there are enough of them. I will respond to comments if there are questions, so again, leave them if you want some more clarification on some stuff. I'm just hoping that this video actually makes sense as is, but we'll see. Anyways, that is my insane rambling and my first Bakugan video in a few months, and it's this. You're welcome. Anyway, yeah. So, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.